Welcome to one of a few different webinars that are going to be hosted on the updated manual and uniform traffic control devices and the Ohio supplement. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center, and I'm very pleased to have with me Kevin Fiant and Jonathan Young, who will be your hosts and presenters for today on this topic. Just going to run through a couple of quick housekeeping items before we start. As you might have noticed, we have a new interface for you with GoToWebinar. So I want to make sure that you're familiar with where things are located now. The first thing I wanted to make certain is that you know where to get your handouts, and that should be in the upper right-hand corner. You should see a rectangle with some lines in it. It's a white rectangle with some black lines and a paperclip looking icon on the upper left corner. If you click there, you will have two files available to you to download. One are the slides from today in a PDF format, and the other one is a flyer that will give you links to the future webinars if you haven't already signed up for those. They've broken the webinars out for you into different topic areas because we realize not everybody uses every section of the MUTCD. So we're glad to have you with us this morning. On your upper right-hand corner, you're also going to see a little call-out box with a question mark in it. And that's where we would like for you to submit questions as we're working through today's presentation. They will be monitored and responded to. And if it's something that we need to dig into a little bit more, we might circle back to you after the webinar to get you a response as well. But please know that all questions should be submitted through the question box that's available through that icon with the question mark in it in the upper right-hand corner. No, you should not see anything on your screen yet. We're getting there. Hang tight, Marty. And then, last but not least, we are attempting to record this webinar. If it's successful, you'll get a link to the recording. If it's not successful, at least you're here to get the information firsthand. So with that, Kevin, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Great. All yours.
All right. Well, first off, thanks again, everyone, for joining us this morning here. Hopefully be able to give you a few tidbits on the MUTCD and how, some of the changes that have happened, and hopefully you'll walk away with a few things at least that you'll be able to use in your day-to-day. So, but before we get into it, real quick, I'm going to turn the camera on just so you can put a face to the name. Hopefully this works. Can you see me all?
You sure can.
Okay.
You're waving at us. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, just wanted to make sure that you were aware that I am an actual human being, not an AI chatbot. So, got that covered. I'll shut the screen share down, but talk a little bit about myself just to kind of give you some background. Whoops, get out of that. All right, so just real quick, and I'm going to transition into our slides here as well. But real quick about myself. So again, name's Kevin Fiant. The way to remember it, the way I tell people is it's just kind of like a giant, but with an F instead of the G. That's just kind of the easiest way to remember it, I guess. But in any case, let me get to the slides. And a bit more about myself. So again, I've been with ODOT for 25 plus years now. First 20 were all up at ODOT District 6, held a variety of different roles up there, including project management, some design of projects, also managed our design group for some time up there, also did quite a bit of plan review. So kind of wore a lot of different hats up at District 6. And then for the last 4+ years, almost 5 years now, have been down here at central office working on the traffic control standards, just making sure that those are kept up to date, kind of managing all of that information, making sure people are getting the latest information related to traffic standards. So that's a little bit about myself here, and we'll jump in because I know, I'm standing between you all and lunch, and also some of you may be wanting to get to the first tip of, the first games of March Madness. So want to get into this and get you out of here on time. So jump in. And, Victoria already covered some of this, but I'll just kind of re-emphasize some of the housekeeping items. Like she had mentioned, if you will, please just put any questions that you might have as we go through this into the question box. And it would greatly help us also if it's a question related to a particular slide, just throw the slide number in there. That way we can we've got a couple other folks here that are monitoring things, and that'll help us to pull those slides up and get those responses to those questions. We will be at the end of the session. Any questions that we haven't responded to already in the question box, will be responding to those at the end of the session. So again, just, no need to wait. If you have questions, you can go ahead and throw it in there, as it comes to mind. So the other thing just to mention real quick, since this is a pretty long session, we've got, 2 hours scheduled here. I am planning about midway through to have a short break. So just wanted to make everybody aware of that as well. So we'll get into it. First off, just want to talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. The purpose of this first session is just to kind of get all of the foundational pieces, I guess, if you will, of the MUTCD, to kind of cover all of that. So we're going to be spending some time talking about just kind of a general overview of the manual itself. We'll also be talking about just, since we have transitioned to a slightly different model, want to talk about, how to navigate, how to get around in the new OMUTCD, which consists now of a supplement plus our national MUTCD. Then we're going to jump into some of the specifics with part one, and then we're kind of wrap up with just a quick discussion looking at the appendices in the MUTCD. So like I say, this is kind of the foundational session, just to kind of lay all the groundwork for some of the other information that's to come in the future sessions we have scheduled.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
We're going to break in here real quick.
Yeah.
There's let's see. There's apparently a difference between seeing the slides and not seeing the slides. They could not see them on the browser, but they downloaded the desktop app and they were able to see the slides. So
do you want me to jump out and maybe try a reshare?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, let's try that.
There's plenty of folks who can see them, but I want to make sure that everybody can see them. So.
All right, I'm gonna do the reshare here. Okay, so I should be back to screen share. Right now it's just my browser window. We'll jump back into the slides.
Okay.
How's that? Did that help for anybody that was having
Can people
issues?
see them now? If you just put it in the question box and let us know. Yeah, it says that no, they still can't see it through the browser.
Okay. But most are able to, from what you're seeing?
Some people are saying yes, they could see it before as well in the browser. So.
Okay.
Well, some people are on the browser and they can see them. So
Maybe that's
yeah, I would say if you cannot see the slides, please try exiting out and coming back in. Our system will track that, so you'll still get credit. Plenty of your people are saying they can still see it. They could see it both times. So if you're someone who can't see it, please try exiting out, coming back in, and hopefully that'll help you with this issue. So I don't want
Hey,
to hold you up.
Victoria,
Yep.
I wasn't able to see on the web version, but I opened up in the desktop and it worked. So I
Okay.
can see the
All
presentation
right.
and
So
questions
yeah,
now.
those of you who are having those issues, please try, like I said, or try switching from the browser to the desktop. And I'll see what else I can find to help you out. But Kevin, you go ahead and keep going with the topic and the information.
okay.
And for those of you, please go ahead and try.
Yeah, and I mean,
If
another suggestion maybe for folks would be if they are able to download the slides, they could just
yeah,
kind of follow
follow
along
along
there
and
as well.
listen
So,
to. Yep. And I'll look for some troubleshooting and see what I can put in the chat for everybody. So, but yeah, let's keep going so the content gets covered.
okay. All right. All
Thanks.
right.
Thank you.
All right. So we're talking session goals. So, again, like I said, we're the purpose here, we want to show people, since we've changed up how we're providing the OMUTCD, we wanted to kind of show users how to navigate around with that new information, and how to use the two manuals together, which uh, in combination, make up our new OMUTCD. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Again, we're going to be touching on some of all of the Ohio specific language. So any section that, we do have any Ohio specific language, we'll be pointing that out throughout the course of the presentation. And then, we also just in general, we're going to go through, the entire portion of part one, as well as the appendix. I mean, it's not going to be a deep dive, but we are at least going to mention all of those things. So moving on to some things that, this session is not going to be able to do, I mean, with the amount of content that we've got, I mean, the national MUTCD document is 1,100 and some pages. We're not going to cover every single change throughout. I mean, there's just, there was a significant amount of changes, and we just are not going to have the time to do that. So just want to make, get that out to folks early on. As far as info with the changes from the 2009 MUTCD to the 11th edition, I listed on the slide here a couple of references that you can go back to if you're interested, and you want to see all of the changes. On the national manual, they did a markup version that shows the 2009 with all of the proposed markups, or most of the proposed markups. There were a few areas that were missed, which is a really nice reference. But the thing to remember, if you do take a look at that old reference, that does not take into account our OMUTCD, because previously we had our own manual, and if there was some information that we added or took out of the OMUTCD, that's not going to reflect in that red line copy. So just a couple things to keep in mind there. Moving into the release of the federal manual, so the slide here shows old OMUTCD and then a picture of the cover of the new national manual, and just a couple pieces of information there. So the federal manual or national manual, it became effective on January 18th, 2024. That date's very easy for me to remember. It's my birthday, so you can, I guess, I don't know if that's a weird twist of fate, but or some voodoo curse, but it did it was released, became effective on January 18th of 2024. With the release, each state had 2 years to either adopt the national manual or to create their own state-specific manual, or what we elected to do, develop a supplement document that goes along with the national manual. And then the final bullet point here, so we were able to work through that process, and we published our Ohio supplement document on January 16th of this year. Want to talk a little bit about how we approached this MUTCD transition. So what we ended up doing was, early on with the release of the national manual, we broke out each of the parts, and we essentially formed committees that were focused on each of the individual parts of the manual. The committees were groups of 10 to 15, and some groups just kind of varied somewhat. But those committees were made up of folks from ODOT central office, ODOT districts, some local agencies, and we also had some consulting firms that sat in on some of those committees. So we were able to kind of get a good, some good feedback from, all types of different stakeholders that used the MUTCD. So the next thing, once we set up our committees, we then changed our focus, and we're looking at the new content, comparing it against our previous OMUTCD. So basically kind of how we did this was each of the committee heads kind of took the lead in this area, and they went through and identified, section by section, the different areas that had changes, kind of flagged all that information and summarized it, so that when we met collectively as a committee, we were able to kind of, make the best use of our time, and going through that information, looking at what had changed and those types of things. So once we had everything summarized, we then had multiple meetings, each of the committees, just depending on the size of the sections, the number of meetings kind of varied, but each committee would get together, we would talk through, we went through the whole entire manual, talking through what items we felt like still needed to have Ohio specific content. And so we kind of worked through that based on feedback from the different stakeholders. And then the next step, once we had completed the meetings on the different parts, we pulled together our draft supplement documents and started our coordination with our FHWA partners. And that, was obviously some back and forth. We got feedback from FHWA and made some adjustments to address comments, that type of thing. And as that took a fair amount of time, but we were able to, with a couple days to spare, receive our substantial conformance from FHWA. So that came to us on January 13th of this year. And then, like I said, we published all of the information on the 16th. So, so we were able to hit that 2-year time frame, and get all this information out. One thing I want to hit on real quick also is that, when we started this process, all of the states, across the country, we're talking with their counterparts on the FHWA side, and there was a huge emphasis early on that states work towards reducing the amount of state-specific information content in the manual. And if you think about it, I mean, obviously it makes sense. I mean, we're talking about the manual uniform traffic control devices, so you want uniformity from state to state. So so that was a big emphasis area as we went through this process with this release. And and you'll see that when you compare this to our previous OMUTCD, there's quite a few, there's significant amount less of Ohio specific content here than there was previously. So moving on here, just talking about, so previously, like we already talked about, we had a standalone OMUTCD document. That document, that's not going away. We still are providing that online for folks. And if there, is a need for the archived information, that'll be available to you. But again, it was a standalone document. Now we've moved over to the model of using the national MUTCD plus the Ohio supplement, and those two documents together form or become our Ohio Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And this slide's just a real quick look at, again, the previous OMUTCD cover, and then the cover of the two new documents, the federal manual, and then here on the right is the state supplement document, the cover for that. So again, those two documents make up our new OMUTCD. One thing I did want to hit on real quick, and this is pretty recent, but just a couple weeks ago, the national MUTCD, there was a release of revision 1 information. It was March 5th, so just like I say, a couple weeks ago. So one thing, since we're using this model of national MUTCD plus Ohio supplement, it's important to make sure that you're staying up to date on the releases, any revisions, that type of thing at the national level as well. So you definitely want to utilize this revision 1 document. Basically a big part of the revision 1 changes had to do with they had developed a list of known errors since the release back in 2024, and a big chunk of those known errors have been incorporated into the document. There's some information out there if you want to take a look at all of the specific changes, and we are doing that as well, because there are a few sections of the Ohio supplement that will impact. So we're working through that currently.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
Just a quick request from the audience for those who are following along on the slides.
Mm-hmm.
They asked if you could occasionally just reference what slide number you're on.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
like
sure.
He's on number 11 right now, guys. So, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Apologies for the technical hiccups here, but yeah, we have. So yeah, moving into slide 11 here. This is just showing an overview of all the different MUTCD parts. Again, part 1, that's our general content. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Parts 2 and 3, that's our signs and markings. That will be covered in our next session here in a couple weeks. Then part 4, that's our traffic signals, highway traffic signals. That, along with part 5, we'll be covering in the 3rd session. Another thing to mention here with part 5, all of the other parts of the MUTCD they're the same as what they previously were, with the exception of part 5. So part 5 was previously a section that was, or a part devoted to information related to low volume roads. That's completely gone now, and what's been done now is the information about the low volume roads has kind of been dispersed to all of the relevant parts. So if it's, mostly related to a sign on a low, signing a low volume road, that you'd find that information part 2, markings, etc. Part 5 has been completely, redone, with the emphasis now moving towards traffic control device considerations for automated vehicles, since that is obviously becoming more of a concern as we move forward. Moving on to the next slide, slide 12 here. So just looking at the remainder of the MUTCD parts, so you got part 6, which is our temporary traffic control. So your construction type traffic controls. Part 7, traffic control in school areas. Part 8 gets into railroad and light rail crossings and the traffic controls related there. And then part 9 gets into the bicycle facilities. And then we have the appendices, which we'll cover today. Part 6 is just, if you're interested, that is session 4. Part 7 and 9, that's part of session 5, if you're interested in that training. And then part 8, we lumped together with parts 4 and 5. So if you are interested in any of those future trainings, check those out on the LTAP site. Oops. All right, so real quick, want to talk how to use the new MUTCD and Ohio supplement. And, we tried to make it, we realized, going from one document to two is we're adding some additional requirements there, but we wanted to try to make it as simple as possible. And really all you need to do, you need to go determine which part and section of the MUTCD content you're interested in. That's step 1. Step 2, you want to take a look at the table of contents of the Ohio supplement. If that particular section that you're interested in is listed in the Ohio supplement, you're going to want to go to the Ohio supplement and use that information there. If that info or that part and section is not listed in the Ohio supplement table of contents, then you want to go just use the federal MUTCD materials. Again, we purposely made sure that if info was in the Ohio supplement, excuse me, it was the complete section. So even if it was just a small change of Ohio specific content, we purposely pulled over the entire section. That way, we just didn't want users to have to be constantly leafing back and forth between documents. And we modeled that after what the state of Arizona had previously done with their supplement document. So I guess shout out to Arizona there. That was helpful. So slide 14, we're taking a look here at what the intro table of contents looks like. These are just some, small, probably fairly hard to see maybe on your screen, but just a quick look at, what that looks like. And we'll take a little deeper dive here moving forward. Next slide, slide 15. This is a zoomed in view of what the introduction looks like. And what we tried to do here is just kind of lay out, how to use the document and the formatting and so forth. And, we were very careful with our formatting to be consistent. And it was important to us to make sure that any added content or any deleted national content was still, it would be easy to see that, so with deletions, we would just strike that information out, so you'd still be able to see what the national content was. Moving on. So this slide looks a little closer at the text updates that are associated with the MUTCD. And again, we tried to make it, we were very consistent throughout. Blue underlined information is new Ohio specific content. Red strike through information is deleted national MUTCD content, and that's consistent throughout. Now looking here, we're on slide 17, looking at the figures and tables and how we address those if there were any Ohio specific information. So if we were just adding graphics to a figure, what we would do is we would add that graphic information and then we would cloud it with a blue clouding, just so that it was very easy to see the Ohio specific info. And then similarly, if we were deleting something, instead of just completely getting rid of it, we would shade it with a red shade and then put a red strike through it. So again, you can still see what was there previously. That was an important consideration for us as we went through this process. Slide 18 here, just real quick, want to talk about the paper manual. We've had some questions on this already, and just based off our current policies as a department, we discontinued the policy of providing paper manuals in general, and this is no exception. So, you know, this document or Ohio supplement plus, you know, the national MUTCD are both available online. You can download any information that you would want if you did want to make paper copies, but that would be something that you know, each individual user would need to do themselves. Want to talk a little bit about known errors and updates. So with the content in the Ohio supplement, all we are doing as far as known errors, if there was a known error in the national document, the only time that we would be incorporating that known error into our Ohio supplement is if it was directly related to the Ohio specific content. And there were a few examples of that throughout the Ohio supplement. And actually this going this route has already paid off with the release of revision 1 of the national manual. Now we don't have to go back and just make changes just because known errors are now part of the national MUTCD. And then the second bullet point here, just wanted to make everybody aware that moving forward, so if we do have any updates or corrections, that type of thing, associated with the Ohio supplement, we're going to take care of that on a biannual basis. It'll just be timed with all of our other standard document related updates. So our standard construction drawings, supplemental specs, all of that information be provided at the same biannual basis. Moving on to slide 20 here. So again, just real quick, it's kind of just touch on the schedule again. So like I'd mentioned before, you know, January 16th was the release of our Ohio supplement document. That's when it became effective for use here in Ohio. You know, so it's, again, it's important that all of the different organizations, local agencies, et cetera, throughout the state are aware that this new manual is out there and that folks are starting to use it. So now we're going to transition a little bit. We're on slide 21 here. We're going to look at how to get around on the web page itself. So this first slide here is just a quick look at what the landing page for our Ohio supplement looks like. Over here on the left side is some of our basic, you know, information on some of the regulatory type information associated with the MUTCD. And then here we have links, and I'm going to go ahead and move forward, and because I'm just going to jump into the actual web page itself and just kind of show you all how to get around in there and what information is available there. And, you know, also this particular slide actually is a little bit outdated because there have been a few updates made since these screenshots were taken. So we will jump over here to a quick demo from the live website. So on slide 22, I'm going to jump into the live website. Hopefully that's showing up for everybody. Everybody see that? Victoria, can you see that okay?
I can see it. We're getting lots of thumbs up.
Okay.
Good.
All right. Well, so for those that can see it, so what we're looking at here is our landing page. Like I said, on the text information here gives all of the background information. One thing I do want to highlight is this little indent section talks about our change in using the national MUTCD and the Ohio supplement. And the thing I want to point out here is that we wanted to make it very, very clear that if somebody's saying MUTCD and Ohio supplement, or Ohio supplement MUTCD, or any variation thereof, the intent is that all of those still mean the OMUTCD, or Ohio Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So just want to make sure that that's very clear. So all of those terms we want to make sure that people understand that they can be used interchangeably. Moving on down here, again, some of the background regulatory information, kind of the some of the Ohio Revised Code information that basically instructs us to utilize the MUTCD, and so that's listed there just for reference purposes. Moving on down, got the two links. The one link takes you to the supplement document itself. The other link takes you to the national MUTCD. So again, both of these two documents you're going to need to have available, have open as you're working, if you're looking for any information OMUTCD related. Below here, this is the revision that was recently made, just added some info on revision 1 of the national manual. Just kind of, there's a link that takes you to more detailed information to show what's changed, and just a quick description there. Moving on down the page, again, talk about the known errors and how we chose to address those in our supplement document, and then also just talking about the printed copies. And then the very bottom of our landing page is just kind of a repeat of one of the slides we talked about just a minute ago, or a few minutes ago. Just talks about how to use the Ohio supplement and MUTCD together. So all of that's there on the main homepage. Let me show also here on the right sidebar, we also have the same links. One thing, if you've been here several times, one thing you'll notice, I did do away with the link to the known errors, since most of those have now been incorporated into the revision 1 manual of the manual. So I just got rid of that link altogether. I mean, you can still, as they start to develop more known errors, you'll still be able to get to that. Real quick, I'll jump in. I'm going to click on our supplement document. Wanted to just point out a couple things. So the first thing is our Ohio supplement document. So all of the content is bookmarked, so it's PDF format. So you're, depending on your browser configurations, all that type of stuff, this view may vary a little bit, but it is a PDF document. All of the sections have been bookmarked. So if there's, section of interest, you can just expand the bookmarks. So you want to look here, it'll jump you right to that particular content. So just be aware of that. And then also another thing to mention, so we did, we did our best to make this, all of the material here searchable. So if you're in the document, you do Control+F, come up with your search bar. I'm just going to type in pedestrian because I know that'll give me some hits. So what we did, and I wanted to kind of illustrate this. So even in the figures that are part of the Ohio supplement document, the text that's associated with those figures should be searchable. You should get hits if you're searching, for a particular term that happens to just be text within the figure document. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that as well. Let's see here. I'm going to jump out of the web view, go back to the slides. So we're back on slide 22. I'm going to keep moving here. Again, before we get into the little deeper dive on the details of part 1 and the appendices, wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that, it's been a long time since the National Manual was revised. It dates all the way back to 2009. So there was a lot of changes with this new manual, and what we found, going through all of this, a lot of content was moved around and reorganized into different areas. So if you were familiar with the old manual, it may take a little time to get used to where some of that information's been moved to, but for the most part, most of the information, is still there. It just has maybe been reorganized and moved into a different location. So I want to make sure that, everybody's aware of that. In general, in my opinion, at least, and I think several others that I've talked to, that reorganization it makes a lot of sense. I think it helps in finding your way through the document, getting to the material that you're interested in. All right, so we're moving on to slide 24 here. I'm going to take this just overview slide talking about the different chapters within part 1. So we're going to look at chapter 1A, which is our general information, chapter 1B, the legal requirements for traffic control devices, so that's for our any of the lawyers that might be in our audience today. Chapter 1C looks at definitions. That's the biggest part of that chapter, but also, other acronyms and abbreviations that are used in the manual. And then 1D is provisions applicable to traffic control devices. So we're going to take a little deeper dive in all of those areas. So moving on now on to slide 26 here. So section 1A01, talking about the purpose of the MUT. And obviously, again, like I said, this is the foundational information for the whole entire manual. And the purpose, obviously, it's pretty important to kind of establish the purpose here. And I just highlighted this small portion here talking, which says to establish uniform national criteria for the use of traffic control devices. And again, already talked a little bit about how the emphasis was with this release, that we try to reduce the amount of state-specific content, state-specific changes with the manual. Also in this section, there's some discussion about the presumptive use of working knowledge in traffic engineering. There's a big emphasis, and we're going to get to this later, of really taking a much deeper dive with this manual into talking about the use of engineering judgment, engineering studies, and that type of thing. We'll take a closer look at that as we move forward. All right, moving on to slide 27 here. TCDs, which is just, I just abbreviated just to fit the slide a little better. That just stands for traffic control devices. And this is the general description, and throughout this presentation, so as if you take these slides away with you for reference down the road, pretty much any section that is covered within the Ohio supplement, I made a note generally towards the top of the slide and highlighted it just so it stood out if you're if that's helpful to you, going back through this information. But again, so we're talking general description, and what we ended up changing with Ohio specific content was the definition of traffic control devices. And as you can see here, we added flaggers to that definition. And the reason being is that our Ohio Revised Code included flaggers with our definition of traffic control devices, and working, coordinating with our legal team, we felt like that was important to make sure that that remained moving forward. Also, just want to point out that this particular section talks about several things that are out in our roadways but are not necessarily traffic control devices. So we're talking things like curbs and rumble strips, fencing, roadside attenuators, that type of stuff. Moving on to slide 28 here, again, just talking about other items in the right of way that are not traffic control devices. So I listed off some of those and got a picture of one here. So your utility markers that are out in our right of way, those are, they certainly have their place out in the right of way, but they're not considered traffic control devices. So if you're looking for information on markers, you're not going to find it in the MUTCD. You're going to need to look elsewhere. Another thing just to point out real quick, so identifiers for culverts or bridges are not considered traffic control devices. I just want to kind of put an asterisk there. We do provide signs for that, and we have those signs available out in our reference information. We do that primarily just for the convenience of our maintenance folks and others, just to help be able to locate those assets all throughout the state. Moving forward to slide 29 here, talking about target road users. So a big emphasis with this release of this manual was to include more information to address our vulnerable road users. So we're talking, bicyclists and pedestrians, others with disabilities, and that was even mandated by federal law. So in this document, there's, one of the big pieces of new information kind of sprinkled all throughout the manual is some more information that's targeted towards those road users, those vulnerable road users. So be aware of that, and just be aware that, if you're working on a project, that you need to take into consideration all of the potential road users and make sure that you can optimize the space and the traffic control devices for all of those different users. Moving on to slide 30, use of the MUTCD, this is section 1A04. Just highlighted this paragraph 2 portion of this paragraph 2, and I'll just read it off real quick. Where the content of this manual requires a decision for implementation, such decision shall be made by an engineer or an individual under the supervision of an engineer. Again, like I said earlier, that's an area in this manual that there's definitely some increased emphasis there. And then further down in that section, the terms engineering judgment and engineering study are brought up, and we'll take a little deeper look at that here a little later on. But that's, again, a big emphasis area with this new release of the MUTCD. Continuing on to slide 31, this is, again, some items from section 1A04. And the big thing here, just talking about, the support statement, talking about how we've got our standard, guidance, option, and support. statements throughout the manual, and that obviously is a big deal on how the manual is set up, and the meaning of all of those is important, which I think we will touch on here shortly, take a little deeper dive there. Also, just pointing out to this particular section lays out if for some reason you need to formally cite a section of the manual, this spells out the recommendation on how to do that. Moving on to slide 32 here, section 1A05, so this relation to other publications. Again, this is a section that is in our Ohio supplement, and what the reason that it's in the Ohio supplement is we added some information in here that references folks to our sign design and markings manual, which goes along with the SHS document that is the standard highway signs document provided by the FHWA folks. So that's the reason for the change here to be part of the Ohio supplement. And then the one thing here I highlighted in pink, it's important to remember that this MUTCD is not a roadway design manual. So again, if you're trying to figure out how to design a guardrail or impact attenuator, this is not the place you want to be looking for that information. You want to go to the Green Book or other resources. Moving on to slide 33, the Uniform Vehicle Code. This is a new section, was not in the previous manual, and really all it's doing is just referencing the Uniform Vehicle Code and talks about how a lot of the information within the MUTCD is based off of language in that Uniform Vehicle Code, and then it also makes some suggestions on states, reviewing that and any regulations that states are looking to add. It suggests reviewing the information in the UVC. Moving on to slide 34, we're going to transition here to Chapter 1B. So this is the legal requirements for traffic control devices. So 1B01, slide 35, describes the facilities that the MUTCD applies to. And then below, I just added a little screenshot of the different facilities. And I mean, this is an important one to be aware of because the MUTCD doesn't just apply to ODOT maintained streets or City of Columbus maintained streets. It applies to essentially any street that is being used by the public. And that's regardless of whether that street is public or private. There's a few caveats down towards the bottom here. So a privately owned toll road. Also, if you have a gated facility where the general public can't access, those would not fall under the MUTCD, but in general, most all roadways do fall under the MUTCD, and you're required to provide the traffic control devices that are laid out in this manual. In this slide, slide 36, so this talks specifically about what the MUTCD does not apply to. And so I got a little bit ahead of myself talking about it on the last slide, but again, this applies to roadways within private gated properties where access to the general public is restricted. It does not apply to grade crossings of privately owned roadways with railroads or light rail. And it does not apply to parking areas. So your driving aisles, those types of things. But if you look back at the previous slide, it does apply to the roadways within, say, some type of a commercial development, so that there's an important distinction there, just to be aware of. Moving on to slide 37, state adoption and conformance. So we've already kind of talked about this. This just lays out the requirement that states had 2 years to either adopt the national or develop their own supplement or their own document. And then it also talks about this term substantial conformance and kind of what that means. For those that are interested, you can take a deeper dive there. It gets into Code of Federal Regulations. Moving on, slide 38. So this slide, we're talking about compliance of devices. And this area, I want to hit on this a little bit. The FHWA has developed a MUTCD FAQs page where there's a lot of those commonly asked questions, and I copied one of them over here, which I think is pretty important and is a pretty common question that we get here at the state. But the question is, if there is no compliance date for one of the new requirements, when do devices in the field have to be upgraded to meet the requirements? And I'm not going to read through this whole answer, but this highlighted section here, basically it's saying, when the devices are no longer serviceable because they reach the end of their service life or otherwise need to be replaced, or when other events such as a highway improvement or reconstruction project occur. So what this means is that you don't have to immediately rush out there and make changes to all kinds of signs or markings or things like that, where there have been some changes. You have time to put a plan together, get resources together to address those things through the service life of that particular device. And then also, if you're doing a construction project, you need to be making sure that your new construction project is incorporating the new information in the MUTCD. So that's a pretty common question, and felt like it was important for folks to be aware of that. And the link there to the FAQs is provided there at the bottom of the slide. Moving on, slide 39. So we're looking at the target compliance date. So these, we just talked about, you didn't have to rush out and replace traffic control devices for most things. So this section and this table in particular lays out, there's just a handful of just 6 items on this table that do have some specific compliance requirements with specific dates. One thing just wanted to mention here, with the release of the revision 1 of the national manual, they have went ahead and updated this column here with the actual dates. Previously the original release just had 5 years from the effective date. They've put the actual dates in there. So that does mean, we do have this in our Ohio supplement. Just to clarify that, currently this will be going away from the Ohio supplement because there's no need for it, since it's now been clarified at the national MUTCD document. Another thing here, want to make sure that our local agencies that are on this session, this applies to everybody. It's not just ODOT specific. It applies across the board, and we're going to take a little closer look at some of these target compliance states. So moving on, slide 40 here. So the first one we're going to talk a little bit about is the weight limit signs, and that's coming from section 2B64. So I'll be talking about that when we get into the signs and markings further. But I wanted to kind of lay out here, all of these target compliance dates, because it's obviously important. They're time critical. So want folks to be aware of these things. So with this one, basically, what the requirement is that the Ohio Supplement and MUTCD requires 2 signs. One at the actual structure itself, and then one in advance of the structure. And so what we've done, and actually before we jump to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit here at the bottom. The old sign, so this was another change, and I guess those folks that manage signs in any of the local agencies across the state that have any posted bridges, be aware of this. So the sign that we used to use when we were posting bridges has now changed to the one that's on the right hand side here. That was kind of through some collaboration back and forth, feedback, working with our FHWA partners. So again, be aware of the fact that the weight limit sign has changed. So this is what we're looking at. And I'm going to move on to the next slide. So what we've done, at least to help our ODOT districts, is we have developed some guidance in our TEM manual, and this slide talks about that. So it's in TEM 201-9. Then we have a figure associated as well. It's 298-3. And so what we ended up doing here, we went a little bit over and above what the actual MUTCD required, but we just felt like this allowed us to cover our bases a little better, and hopefully pick up any drivers that might have overweight, might be driving an overweight vehicle. So what we ended up doing, we have 2 advanced signs, one at the nearest crossing to the bridge, and it's important that this be placed so it's downstream of that crossing but visible. So if somebody happens to be coming on the side road, they would still see that sign. Then we have one even before you get to the side road, so that if overweight vehicle would have the opportunity to utilize the side road to miss the actual structure, which is up here. And there's also a sign right at the structure. So we actually have 3 with our recommendations. And like I said, you can find that in the TEM manual. Moving on, talking about the next target compliance date, this has to do with low clearance signs. So this is for your bridges, any arches, tunnels, things like that. Compliance date here is January 18th, 2029. We have developed some information again in our TEM that, for our folks out at the districts, that they can utilize this to kind of help them in meeting these requirements. And, our local agencies are certainly welcome to take a look at this as well. Moving on to slide 44 here, the next compliance date is maintaining minimum retroreflectivity, and we're talking about pavement markings. This is not new. This was added actually with the previous manual, but since the deadline date was still beyond the release of the new manual, it was still added in here. This deadline date is coming up quick, September 6th of this year. So, ODOT is addressing this by working with a consulting firm to develop some, life cycle, to evaluate life cycle based off geographic location and traffic volumes. That's how we're looking to address this. There's several different methods that folks can use, and I won't take a deep dive, but you can look further into that if this is something that is needed if you're responsible for maintaining pavement markings at your agency. Next slide here. This is more info on the minimum retroreflectivity. Again, like I said, ODOT is using the service life based on historical data. We also are going to be doing some periodic checks to just do some sampling to make sure that our pavement markings are meeting the needs and meeting that retroreflectivity requirement. And one thing I just wanted to go back to that slide. One thing to mention for the local folks, there is a research project that's going on now, pavement marking selection for local public roads in Ohio. If that's you, take a look at what our research office is putting together. There's more information there. I'm going to keep moving here on to slide 46. The next one of the target compliance states, this has to do with our high profile grade crossings. So, these are, like, as you can see from the picture here, this is your rail crossings, pretty steep grades up, approaching, and then as you leave the crossing, and sometimes the low, trucks with lower bellies sometimes will drag on those or get caught on those. And so the idea here is to provide some signage and some potential detour routing for those types of vehicles. Again, that's a January 18th, 2029 compliance. The next one here, so this is highway traffic signals at or near grade crossings. So the sections that this compliance date covers, it's part 8, sections 8D09 through 8D12, and this one has a little further out compliance date because this is pretty involved. There's a lot of information there, and to evaluate these locations. But the picture here is just an example of the type of thing we're talking about. You got a traffic signal that's in close proximity to a rail crossing. What the purpose of this is to address these types of issues such that, if you did have vehicles stacking up, queuing here, we want to make sure we're addressing that so that we don't get queues that are backing up onto the tracks, which obviously cause very serious crash incidents. So that's the purpose there. And let's see, real quick, just to talk about, I'm on slide 48, talking, continuing on that topic of the near grade crossings, looking at the highway traffic signals. So a quick review of the MUTCD, the most common distance that they're talking about is 200 feet, but there are a few areas where they talk more than 200 feet, and they also mention 400 feet. So unfortunately, it's not a black and white number for you, but just wanted to kind of mention, the approximate distance that we're talking about, that 200 to 400 feet range. Moving on to slide 49, interpretations. So this section talks about the FHWA interpretations on your unique situations, other clarification of the manual. This section also includes all of the information that any agency or entity that is requesting an interpretation, all the information that is needed to be, pulled together before you submit that request. And then it also refers folks to section 1B08, which with this manual, this is an example of some of the it listed, how you submit things right in that section. But since the submittal process is the same, whether you're talking about, interpretations, experiments, other things, there was a new section created that covers all of that stuff. Moving on, slide
Hey, Kevin.
50. Yes.
We did have a question about when the break might be happening.
It is coming up, and if
Okay.
people want to, we can do it now if people would like to do
you.
that, or I think there's maybe another 5 or so slides. I can't remember exactly.
It's completely up to you.
How about we'll roll on through this and
Okay.
pick up the pace here a little bit.
Sounds good.
So section 1B05 experimentation. So this talks about, if there are new traffic control devices that folks are wanting to use out on the public roads that aren't part of the manual, this lays out the processes for getting an experiment approved. It's very important that folks make sure, before you start experimenting with a traffic control device, that you get that approved at the federal level. This slide here, this is slide 51, process for experimentation. This is in our supplement. The only reason it's in there is that we just wanted folks to make sure to also include the Ohio context when, say a local was requesting an experiment. We just want to make sure that we're in the loop and we kind of are aware of what, everything that's being requested. Section 1B06. So this is this discusses changes to the national MUTCD, and so this is if you have a proposed change that you want, you would like to see incorporated into the MUTCD. This kind of works through how to do that. The process for that. It's pretty descriptive, the process. And then I also wanted to briefly talk about, if there was a need for a change in the Ohio supplement, like we talked about before, our intent is to address those updates, changes as part of our biannual process. And there we go. We're to our break, and we'll start back up. 5 minutes, maybe a touch quicker,
Okay.
and not too, another 30 or so slides to get through. So
perfect. All right,
okay.
11:17.
All right.
See everybody
Thanks
back
all.
then. We're seeing your screen there. Great, thanks. We're also hearing you, so you might want to mute while we're on break. Thanks.
Can you hear me? Is that coming through? Okay. All right, we'll get going here.
We can hear you great.
All right. Well, hopefully everybody was able to stretch and get some coffee or whatever you need to do, and we will get back into this and pick it up a little bit just to make sure we have a little bit of time at the end here for some questions. So I'm moving on to slide 54, the section 1B07. So talking about interim approvals. So this allows for provisional use of new traffic control devices or revisions to existing traffic control devices or a provision not specifically in the manual. So this section lays out the process to try to get an interim approval. The other thing I want to mention here at the bottom of the slide, Ohio, there is one interim approval that's already been approved at the national level, and it's interim approval 23. And Ohio has received statewide approval for the use of this, and it is residential driveway temporary signals. And that's a new name for it. We used to call them, at least here in the state, we used to call them DADs, was the acronym, which stood for Driveway Assistant Devices, I believe. So just be aware of that we have received statewide approval for use, but it's important to understand that doesn't mean you can just go use these without any, notification or anything. There is still some notification required. And that's what this slide here, slide 55, talks about. So again, even if you are, we've got statewide approval, but even with that, we need agencies to reach out to us to let us know that they are planning to use that interim approval item. And then at the bottom of the slide here is a link. We've set up a web page where users can submit those types of requests. So that information's there at the bottom of the screen. Moving on to slide 56. So this slide, I just wanted to kind of throw up on this slide some examples of interim approval items from the previous manual that are now incorporated into this new manual. So here on the left-hand side, we've got one of our RRFBs. So those are now, there's a specific sections in the MUTCD that address these. So these are no longer, these no longer interim approval items. Similarly, this is an example of a intersection bicycle box. Those used to be interim approval items, no longer. They're part of the MUTCD. Here in the bottom right, and it's kind of hard to see here, but this is a two-stage bicycle box. These are also part of the new MUTCD, so no longer an interim approval. And then here at the top right, you've got your bicycle signal faces that are now part of the MUTCD. So transitioning here, wanted to spend a quick bit of time and just do a little interactive quiz with folks. I'll set this up for you, kind of explain it. So what we're looking at here is an aerial view. This is downtown Columbus. So this is Spring Street. This is a one-way street headed towards the west. Multi-lane. You've got a bike lane here. And then this is Grant Avenue. So this is a, two-direction street, northbound, southbound. At this intersection, this is a fully signalized intersection. So the question I'm posing to everybody is, how do you legally make a left turn while heading westbound on Spring Street to go southbound on Grant Avenue if you're on a bicycle. And going to move to the next slide here. And up here at the top, so this I've set up, there's a little Menti poll. So folks that are, you know, on a computer, on your phone, whatever, you can go to menti.com, use this code 39709778. And I'm going to give you a quick explanation of your potential answers here. So option A. So option A is if you're a bicyclist, you're in this bike lane, you're moving along Spring Street, you have a green, on the spring signal is green, you can move into this 2-stage bike box, you stop, you physically turn your bike 90 degrees heading south on Grant, and you wait for that signal on Grant before you proceed moving on southbound on Grant. So that's option A. Option B, you're also in the bike lane. You're traveling along here. You've got a green on Spring. You come to the 2-stage turn box. You stop. You turn your 90 degrees. Now you're facing the Grant signal. And then you see some gaps on Spring, and you go ahead and you proceed southbound on Grant Avenue. That's option B. Option C, you're in the bike lane, and as you approach this intersection, you move out into the traveled lane here, the motor vehicle lane, and then you slowly make your way over to the left lane, and then you make your left turn onto Grant. You know, all of this happening while the Spring Street signal is green. And then your option D is both A and C. So let's jump from here. I want to jump to the Menti poll and kind of see what everybody's thinking here. Get this pulled up. Okay.
I just want to mention the code too for anybody who might not have a screen going. It's 39709778. Thanks.
Okay, so we're getting some good responses here. I'll give folks a little bit more time here. So we got quite a few selecting A, and you got quite a few with the A and C, and just a couple with your B or C. So, okay. So that's pretty good. You know, we got some pretty good responses here. I appreciate everybody's feedback on this question. I'm going to jump back to our slides, get them going again. All right. So as far as the answer for that, and I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a trick question, not really, but a little bit, but definitely A is a legal movement. B, definitely not a legal movement, but unfortunately we do occasionally see some bicyclists still doing that type thing, you know, and I think there's still some, you know, some misunderstandings on the proper use of the 2-stage bike boxes. C is also okay. It's legal. It's not one that I would certainly recommend if you've got high volumes, but it's certainly legal. I mean, a bicycle, once they get out into the normal traffic lanes, is a vehicle, so they could make that movement. So your answer is D. So for those that chose D, if I had candy bars to virtually give to you, I would hand those out now. But since we're all virtual, we'll have to wait. You'll have to send me an IOU. And just a quick public relations, if you want to take a deeper dive into some of these bicycle related issues, that's going to be in session 5 of our training sessions. Moving on, so we're on to slide 61. And can everybody still see the screen share? Sometimes that's been a problem. Victoria's
Yeah,
showing
it
up for
looks
you.
like everybody sure can,
Okay.
for the most
All right.
part.
Okay.
Thanks.
And I know we've still got some of those technical difficulties, but I just wanted to check in. Okay.
Yeah.
So on to slide 61. So this is talking about requesting interpretation. So this is the section that, you know, and it's not just interpretations, experiments, whatever. This is the section that just lays out how to go about submitting all that information. I'm not going to take a too deep of a dive here, but if that happens to be you, this is the section you'd want to go to. Moving on to chapter 1C. So this is where we get into definitions, acronyms, abbreviations. And here in the slide 63, so this is an important one, and I wanted to take a bit of time talking about this. So the headings that are used all throughout the MUTCD, you know, this is not the standard guidance option support. That's not changed from previous versions. You know, the use of these terms. But what has changed, and what I want to point out here on the slide is, you know, that there have been some slight adjustments to the language. So on the right-hand side is the previous federal MUTCD, and it's showing what's proposed to be changed as far as standard guidance, etc. And the thing I did want to point out, it's a little bit subtle, but just want to make everybody aware, you know, with the guidance statement, it talks about you know, previously it talked about it was a statement of recommended but not mandatory practice. You know, one subtle edit that was made was they got rid of the but not mandatory portion of that. So just want to point that out for folks, you know, as to the meaning of standard versus guidance versus option, etc. Moving on to slide 64, definitions of words and phrases. So this is 1CO2, and this section is in the Ohio supplement, and you know, the reason being, so I mean, this is a huge section of the MUTCD. It's 30 some pages just by itself, but it includes all of the different definitions used within the MUTCD. And so what we did as a state agency, we went through these definitions, you know, us working with our legal counsel, and, you know, our Ohio Revised Code also has quite a few of these definitions, and we wanted to make sure that you know, that we reviewed all of those, and if there were specific definitions that had differences from the Ohio Revised Code standpoint, that they were included here in the Ohio supplement. So that's what you see here. And one thing to point out, you know, so throughout the whole entire Ohio supplement, one thing that we did just to make sure that it was a little bit easier to see, you know, hey, this was a Ohio Revised Code related change. At the end of any Ohio specific content, we added this, you know, ORC reference in brackets, and that should be, you know, consistent again throughout the whole Ohio supplement document. Moving on, slide 65. So engineering judgment versus engineering study. And like I said, I mean, so in the definition sections, you know, this is a lot of this information is new or tweaked, changed from the previous manual. They did a lot better job, I think, this go around of really diving into the definitions of each of those. And the key thing here just to mention is, so engineering judgment, you know, can be it can be done without documentation, of the engineering judgment that's down here towards the bottom. But an engineering study, you know, so throughout the manual, it might say, you know, based on an engineering study or based on engineering judgment, you can do this or you can do that. There is a distinction between those, so make sure you're familiar with engineering study versus judgment. Study does require, you know, actual physical documentation. One thing I also wanted to point out in the definitions section, so this is slide 66, this is a completely new addition to our Ohio Revised Code. This was not specifically addressed. So the definition for shoulder, and essentially what we did in our Ohio Revised Code is we utilized this MUTCD definition with no changes, but I just wanted to point out that that is a new addition to the ORC. So another thing just to point out, and we talked about the, you know, the private roads, and one thing that this new MUTCD did was they changed the language a little bit there. You know, previously it was called private road open to public travel. So with this new MUTCD, they changed the name of it to site roadways open to public travel, because it you know, in some cases site roadways could be owned by a public entity. So that's, I think, was the main reason for that change. But I just wanted to point out that that term has changed to site roadways open to public travel. And again, that's slide 67. Moving on, slide 68 here, the vehicle definition. Just want to point out, so we, in a few cases when we were working with our counterparts at FHWA, they had requested if we had, I guess, a little bit more significant change with our definition, they wanted us to show those as kind of a separate standalone definition. So that's just kind of an example of that. And in this case, you know, we've got our vehicle definition from the Ohio Revised Code and as definition 284A. So if we did have to do that, that's what we would do. We would just add a, you know, A, B, C, whatever to that number. Okay, all right, we'll speed things up a little bit here. Looking at acronyms and abbreviations. So we've got, this is Ohio Supplement, you know, this just kind of explains all the different acronyms used throughout, abbreviations used throughout. Chapter 1D, we'll jump into that, slide 70. Purpose and principles of the traffic control devices. So this just kind of provides that overall purpose of traffic control device, and you can read the standard that's on the slide here. It was just added in there to clarify requirements for the use of those traffic control devices on the site roadways open to public travel. Moving on, section 1D02 in the Ohio Supplement, responsibility and authority for traffic control devices. You know, again, so this section is in the Ohio Supplement. Reason being is that we added this paragraph 01A, which just talks about the village permission requirements in our ORC in relation to traffic control signals. 1D03, that's slide 73, engineering study and engineering judgment. This is also in the Ohio Supplement, and the reason we added it in here is that we just wanted to make sure that we basically took this language that was in existing paragraph 2, moved most of it down, and created a new paragraph 2A, and we just kind of elevated that. We wanted to make sure that that there was documentation associated with deviations that are talked about, in this section. I'll keep moving here. Slide 74. So design of traffic control devices. So this is just talking about your basic principles of traffic control devices, and this talks about, except for symbols or colors, minor modifications of those elements, may be made based on engineering study or judgment. But the overarching thing is that the standard traffic control devices are set up with the colors, symbols, etc., for a purpose and a reason, and there needs to be good reasoning to deviate. And some traffic control devices you cannot deviate. Moving on, slide 75, color code. So this just lays out all of the different colors for the different type traffic control devices. Not gonna go too deep here, but if you're curious about why a particular sign or device is a particular color, it's coming from here. 1D06, public domain copyrights. So this section gets into if you were experimenting, say, on a new traffic control device. It talks about what information has to be publicly available and what can still be copyright protected is what this section covers. 1D07, advertising. This is slide 77. Basically, the gist here is that advertising messages on traffic control devices is prohibited. There's a few instances like our logo signs, things like that, where company information is provided, but that's, there's some pretty specific requirements there. Abbreviation. So this section 1D08, talking about abbreviations. So there's a table that lists unacceptable ones. So that's what I've got shown on this slide. So it's important if you're a changeable message sign operator that you're aware of these abbreviations and you're not using those in your messaging. Slide 79. Placement, operation of TCDs. So this just gets into your placement. Just in the interest of time, just to allow a little bit for questions, I'm gonna kind of keep moving here. Maintenance. So slide 80 just talks about maintenance. Here's a couple of example pictures of what we typically do not want to see as far, we want to, these traffic control devices, they're out there for a purpose. We want, we need those to be maintained so that the users can properly see the information. So that needs to be incorporated into each agency's plans, how to make sure that maintenance is incorporated. Crashworthiness. So this is slide 81. The message here is that TCDs need to be crashworthy. It talks about the MASH requirements. There's some different stipulations depending on the devices. So that's what this section gets into. Moving on to the appendices. I'm on slide 82 here. So Appendix A1, this has been in previous versions, just lists off all the different pertinent congressional actions related to traffic control devices. It's only, 3, 4, 5 pages. A2 is metric conversions, straight up exactly what's there, just in case you do have some metric information, it has that conversion, those conversion factors. And then Appendix A3, so this is a new section, part of our supplement. What we did was pulled information in the previous OMUTCD that was in the intro section, and we pulled it and created this appendix, which just kind of maintained the historical information. Moving on to the next slide here, just shows this is what that appendix looks like, just in case there's any need to kind of look through the history of the development of the OMUTCD. Resources, so there's several links here. You guys can check those out now or in the future. And then moving on to questions. So leaving some time there. And Victoria, I don't know if you can kind of pick up and help us through the question aspect.
Sure. There's been questions that have been answered all throughout. And I know that Jonathan had one that he was just messaging me about. Jonathan, did you want to go ahead and unmute and talk about that one question?
Yeah, of course. So we received a question, if I just pull it up here, or it was more of a comment about queuing over rail crossings and that the information lists the distance instead of just discussing the queuing across the rail crossings. And it's important to first, that information specifically about grade crossings within proximity to traffic signals is covered in 8A.12 of the MUTCD. And it's kind of broken into two parts. The requirement for the evaluation is specifically a shall statement for grade crossings within 200 feet of an intersection, but there is also a should statement that if there is queuing across the rail crossings, that those should be evaluated as well. So with that said, going back to what we or Kevin discussed briefly on the definitions, unless there is a specific engineering reasoning not to evaluate it, those should still be evaluated.
Great. And then one question that came in is someone who was looking at a question about a definition of a truck, and perhaps they can send some further explanation about that into the question area. But they did mention that an email had been sent in last week about this too. So I don't know if one of the two of you had actually received that email and knew what was being referenced here. If not, I've got other questions.
No, in that the definition of truck specific to what they're asking is found within the ORC specifically.
Ohio Revised Code. Great. Yep. All right. Next question. Are stop sign violations now enforceable by police on site roadways? SITE.
Victoria, we're looking into it right now, and the section that they want to look at is specifically ORC 4511.432. We'll be able to give them for, but that is specifically for private roadway, private roads.
Great. There was a question that came in that is actually for me. They wanted to know, do they need a code for this class? You do not need a code for this class. The way that the CPD law works, the continuing professional development law works for engineers and surveyors, is that you track it on your end, and if you are audited by the board, then it's between you and the board whether or not you should have counted the course or the topic towards your continuing professional development credits. So no code on our end. I will be getting certificates out to you though later today. That is my goal before I head out of here, is to get everybody their certificates. So please watch for that in the email. Looks like there's no other questions right now that have come in. I would like to mention that throughout our webinar this morning, answers have been provided to a number of the questions, and I made certain to send them to everyone. But I know that Jonathan and Kevin both do plan to follow up after the webinar for anything that didn't receive an answer. And there's a spreadsheet that I actually give them that will have the contact information of anyone who asked the questions in there. So, Kevin and Jonathan, are you guys planning on doing any kind of like follow-up question document, like a FAQ or something from this?
We haven't fully discussed it yet, but if you would like to send Kevin and I questions, we're more than happy to address them. And if we get enough of these same questions, we can look at posting them on our MUTCD website.
Excellent. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm still kind of scrolling through the Q&A right now since I was kind of more focused on the presenting the info. But yeah, if there are any that need further clarification, I'm sure we'll be getting that information together and making sure to get it back to you, Victoria, so it can be provided out there.
Sure. And then Devin, I want you to know that your question about private landowners and HOAs is one that they're going to look into and get back with you on specifically. So, Kevin and Jonathan are both brilliant, but we can only push them so far to answer everything right on the most spur of the moment here. So go ahead. Sorry.
Victoria, I want to clarify the stop sign violation question. So the ORC 4511.432 is specifically about stop signs on private roadways. For any road open to the public would be ORC 4511.12.
Great. And I did just put that response in for the question and sent it to everybody. So there's another question that came in. Regarding engineering judgment and studies, does the term engineer refer to any licensed engineer or imply a traffic engineer?
So I didn't specifically hit on that in the presentation, but the MUTCD does talk some about the, what the definition of engineer means. And I mean, it talks about, the different states and the professional requirements in different states. So I don't know the specific section right offhand, but the MUTCD does cover that, yes.
Wonderful. Well, we've still got about 10 minutes left. So
in Victoria, I would, for the engineer question on what type of engineer to kind of go on off what Kevin said, it can be an engineer or someone working, an individual under the supervision of an engineer. But for the exact engineer title, the best place for them to look on their scope of practice would be with the state board and with directly related to what their licensing requirements are.
Perfect. All right, another question that came in. It was mentioned that pavement marking retroactivity requirements were for roadways more than 35 miles per hour. However, I do not think it was mentioned that there are exceptions for that, which include lighting and a 6,000 ADT threshold in the MUTCD. Can you confirm that is accurate? And I'm putting that in our group chat so you both can have the text of that question to look at.
Okay. And we can, we'll take a little closer look at that particular section. It's like, all of the details are in part 3, and I certainly hope to take a little deeper dive on that particular topic when we get to the part 3 session, but I'll look into that a little bit, and we can respond afterwards just to make sure we're citing the right areas of the MUTCD.
Yeah. All right, other questions? While you're thinking about that, I did want to mention, at least for the ODOTers who are on the call today that had technical issues, I am going to follow up with DoIT to make sure they have everybody's profiles updated so you can hopefully get to the proper setup in your computers to get the screen and the audio all at once and go to webinar. We can at least do that on our end. Follow up with DoIT to try to make that as seamless as a process as we can for you. So, all right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, and I feel that Kevin and Jonathan have done a fantastic job today. So, hats off to both of you. We really appreciate your time and all the effort you've put into getting this together for us, and looking forward to the next deep dive here in a couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, thanks all for your attendance, and yeah, hopefully if this was helpful and you have some need for more info in some of those other sections, and you haven't signed up yet, take a look at the LTAP site there and get signed up for these future sessions. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. And Amy, I will make sure to email you that flyer, but it's also in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel, which I'll leave open here for a couple more minutes. But we're going to go ahead and wrap things up today. For now, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you hopefully in a couple weeks. Take care.